Before I leave the topic of where we're headed, I want you to see one thing. One of the places we're headed that's really driving it, and I alluded to it a little earlier in the course, is the ability to query XML data directly out of databases. Now what I've done is, this is SQL Server 2000. I've opened the Query Analyzer in SQL Server 2000, and I'm going to write a query and extract data from a SQL relational database in XML format. Now this is some really cool stuff. If you don't know Transact SQL, just watch and you'll still be able to see what I'm doing. I'm going to select, and the asterisk means all columns, from the authors table, which is a table in the pubs database. Now I type my command, and in this particular interface in Query Analyzer, I click on execute, and notice it returns a record set of information, or a number of rows. And if you'll notice down here, 23 rows of information came back, and if I scroll down and across, I can see this data. Now what's really interesting about this, and I'm going to go up here and put this in text mode and re-execute, and now you can see that I have my data in text mode. Usually you'll query this information, drop it into a record set, load it into a variable, whatever, bind it to controls on a web page or an application, and use the data. But once we get on the web, it starts to get a little differently. We need the data to come to us in an XML format, so number one, it maintains its meaning, and we can still bind it and so forth. So notice they added the for XML, and if I put raw on here and execute this, notice what just happened. This returned this data to me in XML format. Now admittedly, it's about the nastiest XML format you could possibly imagine, because notice what it's done. Every individual row coming back from this database has been marked row. And if I go to the end of this and hit enter, you can start to see how this is laid out. Now, you need to understand something here. The Query Analyzer was never really designed to take streaming data like this. So it runs a little while and then it finally just cuts off, like right here. But do notice what it returned. It returned, for each row of XML data, a tag called row, and all the individual column names are in here as attributes. Kind of interesting, but almost useless, right? Not totally useless, but if you like attributes, it's perfect. But notice what I can do. I can go from raw to auto. Now this starts to look a little better. At least I can tell for every row that it's from the authors table, but it's still an attribute form. But if I put comma elements, now we're really starting to get somewhere. Now let me format this just a second here. And I hope you can see what this has done. Let me get one down here. Now, let me pull this up where you can see it. The screen resolution is kind of tough here. I'll indent this, and you can see that this has returned fairly clean XML data. And then we'll come down here and start another one. Now, and again, I got into some problems with this Query Analyzer, but notice what it did. It returned XML data directly out of my database. Now this is a complete row that came back, and these of course are the various fields or columns in the database. Now this is phenomenal. There is another method, it's a more high-powered method here, where I can actually map and tell it exactly what tags I want and how I want them nested inside of each other. But this is huge. Oracle's doing this. This is nothing so great about Microsoft. Oracle's doing it, IBM's doing it with their products and so forth. But it is now possible to query XML data directly from a database and begin to consume it as XML. And of course, through the various programmatic languages, I can write XML directly into a relational database. So XML is really starting to grow and gain some steam, and you're going to see a lot of it in the very near future.